presentation, I'm going to cover who we are, why state service, how to apply to Cal OSHA, and wrap up with some application tips. So we are hiring, and we are California's Occupational Safety and Health Enforcement branch under DIR, Department of Industrial Relations. Cal OSHA has several branches, has several units, and within those units are different. So Cal OSHA is enforcement branch, and under the enforcement branch, there are different units. For example, there's asbestos and carcinogens, elevators, there's the pressure vessel unit, legal, and there's my unit, recruitment and retention. Our mission is simple but powerful. It is to protect and improve the health and safety of workers across the state of California. Every role here contributes to that mission, from inspecting workplaces to developing safety standards and providing training and outreach. Now that you know who we are and the important work we do, let's hear directly from someone who lives our mission every day. Okay.
You want to go ahead and share the audio? I can also play it from my end if you want.
Okay, yes, please.
Okay. One second, it's just loading on here. Are you able to hear it?
Yes, it's low,
Hi,
but
I'm
we can hear
Shonda
it.
Chambers, and I am an associate safety engineer. My main responsibility as an associate safety engineer is to enforce the California Title VIII Health and Safety Code. It's part of the California Code of Regulations. And my typical day is conducting inspections with high hazard industries where employees have a higher chance of getting sick or hurt at work. Everything we do is to improve the safety culture and understanding in businesses locally here in the state of California. So where people want to do the right thing, they may not know how to do that. We're definitely there to let them know what the law says that they have to do, and help them bring their company into compliance with those laws so that employees have a lower chance of getting hurt or sick at work. I would say the most important qualities you need to have to be a good associate safety engineer are good communication skills, because you are pretty much educating them on some things they may not have heard of before, or they've heard of it, but it was too complex for them to understand what they needed to do. So you're breaking it down in a way that they can understand and implement it very easily.
Thank you. Okay. So now that we've heard about people who live our mission and the important work that they're doing, listening to their stories gives you a glimpse of what it's like to have purpose and passion for what we do and what it means to serve the public. So why state service? Working for the state of California isn't just a job, it's a career with stability, great benefits, and a sense of purpose. And some of these benefits are not always included in the private industry. For example, pension, union representation, professional development, on-the-job training. Some of these great benefits are not available in private industry. So if this sounds like a path you'd like to explore and help make a positive difference, here's how you can get started. Every state job starts at calcareers.ca.gov. So you're going to go to this website, create an account, and you can do a search for Department of Industrial Relations, or you can enter in any keyword and then refine your search by department under Department of Industrial Relations. And when you find a position that you think interests you or is a good fit, the next step is exam reachability. And that's what determines whether you will be interviewed or hired. So every state job starts with an exam. And exam reachability pretty much means you're placed on an eligibility list. And being reachable means your exam score puts you in one of the top ranks that hiring managers can select from. Usually, the higher your score, the better your chances are for being contacted for interviews. So let's wrap up with some insider tips that would help you succeed in the application process. When you go to the exam bulletin, you're going to see the exam information and you're going to kind of get an exam preview. These are great to kind of give you a heads up on what the exam is about and help you prep for the exam. More application tips would be try not to leave any sections blank in your application, be as specific as possible. And the same way the exam information can be used as an exam prep for you, because you can expect what's going to be on the exam off the exam information. You can use the job bulletin to help you tailor your application and kind of prepare your duty statement, resume, statement of qualifications for the job for your application. So I hope that this gives you a clear picture of who we are and why state service matters and how you can take the next step in your career path. We also have opportunities for students. We have paid student internships known as our student assistant program. And we also have industrial hygienist internships. And I can't cover that in today's presentation, but if you reach out to this phone number, 657-660-6697, or to the email below, enforcementrr recruitment retention at dir.ca.gov, with your questions, we'll be able to provide you with more information. And if you want to reach out to me directly, my name is Ibi Asayori. That's my direct phone number and email address. Thank you, and I'll hand the presentation over to our Deputy Chief, Eric Berg.
Hey, thank you, Ibi. I will share my screen. Okay, does that look okay?
Yes.
Okay. Try it. Okay, just trying to get it right on my screen. All right, thank you very much. And my name is Eric Berg. I'm the Deputy Chief of Health for Cal OSHA. Thanks for the intro. And thanks, Ibi, for going over the recruitment process. And hopefully people are interested in working for Cal OSHA. It's a great place to work. So first I'll go over what my branch does, or our branch does here in Cal OSHA, which is the Research and Standards and Medical branch. So first, we have several different units in this branch. First is the medical unit, which has doctors and nurses. And we put the names here of the people that lead the unit. It's Margaret Murray and Mary Kochi for the medical unit. And then we have an epidemiology section with Nitin Singh. And then Research and Standards Health Unit, which is mainly industrial hygienists and safety engineers, led by Kevin. And under him is the Asbestos and Carcinogen Unit, led by Dean. And then similar to the Health Unit, we have the Research and Standards Safety Unit, led by Jason Denning, which is composed of safety engineers, and under that, the crane unit, led by Philip Yao. And we have a research data unit. This is brand new. This is basically help us set up databases, compile data, do economic analysis. So this is a brand new unit we just started in the last year or so, and that's led by Joanne Rodriguez. And under that's the Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries Unit and the Research Program Office. And also brand new to us is this Educational Program and Technical Services Unit led by Stephanie Wynn. So this has the publications portion of Cal OSHA, prepares all the publications we post online and print out and give to the public. And a training unit to provide all the training Cal OSHA personnel need, and then our laboratory led by Supindo once it's dead. Sorry, got the name wrong. So that's the Cal OSHA Research and Standards branch. It's a pretty large branch, lots of different units. So I'll go over some of the work we've been doing. We do all our rulemaking. It's in California Code of Regulations, Title 8. And then I'll go over briefly what we did the last couple of years and then what's coming up for the future. Okay, so what the recent past is, we had a change to the respirator protection regulation and fit testing. And then lead in construction and lead in general industry. Pretty major rulemaking on that. And then indoor heat illness prevention. And then occupational exposure to respirant crystalline silica. So that's all the ones we've done in the past couple of years. And just to go in detail on to each of those, first is the 5144 one we did. But actually, the standards board did most of the work on that one. But it basically allows for an alternative method of fit testing persons to use a respirator using the quantitative methods. Probably an abbreviated method to do that, and it's just quicker. And it's basically what Federal OSHA did, so it's a copy of what Federal OSHA did. And next is lead. This is a regulation that took about 13 years to do, a very lengthy process, but it considerably improved the regulation as far as protecting workers. So it lowered the action level to 2 micrograms per cubic meter. Used to be 30, so 15 times reduction. It lowered the PEL to 10 micrograms per cubic meter, and that used to be 50. And it lowered the medical removal at blood lead levels. So either 2 tests above 20 or 1 test greater than or equal to 30, an employee has to be removed from exposure to lead. And then when they can return has also been lowered considerably. And the worker has to have at least 2 tests less than 15 micrograms per deciliter before they can return to work. So that regulation has reduced a lot of the exposure and measurements to better protect workers from lead poisoning. And next, we have the Indoor Heat Illness Prevention Standard. Came into effect in July 2024. And it provides heat illness prevention measures that previously only applied to outdoor workers and now apply to indoor workers. So they get the same protections when there's a heat illness hazard. Here's kind of a side-by-side of the outdoor regulation, which has been around for 20 years or so, and then the indoor regulation. And you can see they're very similar. The main difference, or really primary difference, is subsection E in the outdoor one. It has high heat procedures where they keep a close watch on employees when it's very hot, over 95 degrees. And in the indoor one, it's assessment and control measures. So it's basically implementing controls to reduce heat illness hazards, such as engineering controls, administrative controls, and heat protective personal equipment. Other than that, the regulations are the same or almost identical. And next we come to silica. Had a pretty serious problem with silicosis in California recently. So we did an emergency regulation at the end of 2023, and then have a permanent regulation that went into effect on February 2025. And some of the key requirements of the new silica standard is it mandates wet methods. It mandates respiratory protection with 1,000 times protection factor, and also additional housekeeping measures, medical removal, and other protections. And these requirements apply regardless of exposure levels. The previous silica standard, which came from the feds about 10 years ago, was dependent on exposure measurements. So we got rid of that and just said, what for certain tasks in fabrication of countertops, these protections are mandatory regardless of exposure levels. So that's one of the key changes. It's not based on measurements. And then lastly, the OPU, that stands for Order Prohibiting Use. So if a Cal OSHA inspector sees them using dry methods for cutting or grinding, or the incorrect respiratory protection, they have the authority to stop the work immediately until it gets fixed. So that's a new power that wasn't there before. And then this is kind of going over the silicosis crisis in California. Just has cases have increased enormously just in the last 3-4 years. So before 2019, cases were nearly unheard of. And then you can see just last year, there was 214 cases. And this year, just in the first couple months of this year, we have 48 cases. So it looks like it'll be even greater this year. And the total in the last few years is 519 silicosis cases in the countertop fabrication, 29 deaths. And the median age of diagnosis 46, so it's much younger than you used to see silicosis before we had these engineered stone countertops. And the median age of death is 49. And then 98% of workers are Latinos. And the majority of the cases are in Los Angeles, Orange County, Bay Area, and Sacramento. So here's also some other stats on silicosis. Of those 500 or so cases, 55 have undergone a lung transplant, which will extend their life for another 5 to 10 years. And then 38 have been referred for a lung transplant evaluation, and 20 have been found ineligible for a lung transplant. And so this slide is just a recreated image. It's not an actual picture, but it shows kind of protections that they should be using, which is a powered air purifying respirator with a protection factor 1,000, and then wet methods where water covers the workpiece while they're working on it. And then here's just some photos we see of actual conditions where you see a lot of silica dust on the floor. And just walking through that dust on the floor could create harmful exposures. And they're wearing N95 respirators, which are completely adequate for silica. Just does not provide enough protection. And you can see on the right that it's not being worn correctly. So that's what we're dealing with. And we've done a large number of inspections in the silica industry and the countertop fabrication industry. Done around 140 just recently, in the last year or two. And about 94% of the shops are not in compliance with the regulation. So it's a big challenge for everyone in the state. Okay, now I'll go over some of the future rulemakings that we have planned in the upcoming years. We have first aid kits, more on heat illness prevention, wildfire smoke protection, the permissible exposure limits, workplace violence in general industry, process safety management in refineries, opioid reversal medications, plume and smoke in healthcare, workplace violence prevention in healthcare, firefighter respiratory protection, hazardous drugs in healthcare, and naturally occurring asbestos. So that's all the rules we have that we're working on now that are up and coming. So first I'll go through those a little bit. First, we have the first aid. That one's already started rulemaking, so it's in the process. But currently, in general industry, requires the first aid kit be approved by a physician that the employer contracts. And so this would allow them to do that, or as another option to use an ANSI-approved first aid kit. And it also requires that the kits be checked weekly, be kept accessible to employees at all times, its location clearly indicated, and evaluate the need for additional items based on the hazards in the workplace. So if you have an unusual hazard, say hydrofluoric acid, you have to have that special calcium glutamate to treat any acid burns. So any unusual hazards, you'd have to also supplement the first aid kit with that. So this was noticed back in November of last year, and we had a public hearing in January. And the next steps is we'll make some changes to proposal based on public comments, and it'll probably be up to the standards board to vote to accept it or not, probably around October of this year. Okay, next is heat illness prevention. This is a bill from the legislature, AB 2243, that requires us to make some changes to the heat illness regulations, both the outdoor and indoor one. So one of the issues, it requires us to change the regulation to require employers to distribute a copy of the heat illness prevention plan upon hiring when they do the required training and once a year, but they're not required to provide it more than twice a year. So basically giving a copy of the heat illness prevention plan to all the workers. And next, we're to add protections for acclimatization to the higher temperatures. Most deaths we see in heat illness are, in the first day or first week of work. So acclimatization is really important. And then we have draft text of these proposed changes on our website. And then we'll schedule an advisory committee just to go over with the public and people interested and get input, just so we always invite public input to help improve the product of our regulations. Next is wildfire smoke protections. This is the same bill as the heat one, but also requires us to revise the wildfire smoke regulation 5141.1 and lower the respiratory protection when it's mandatory to 300, and it's currently at 500. And that would be for farm workers only, at least that's how it is in the bill. And the bill says to exempt employers from fit testing, medical evaluation, and other requirements when respiratory protection is mandatory. And so we have draft text posted to the website, and we also schedule an advisory committee in the future. And next we have work on the permissible exposure limits. First, we have trichloroethylene. It would reduce the permissible exposure limit from 25 parts per million to 0.2 parts per million in the air. So it reduced cancer risk from 106 per thousand at the current PEL to 1 per 1,000 workers as a cancer risk for people exposed for their working lifetime. And the goal for PELs is reduce risk to cancer to 1 per 10,000 workers. In this case, it wasn't reached because of technical feasibility of the permissible exposure limit, but it would be many orders of magnitude reduction in the PEL. Next, we have workplace violence in general industry. So this is another rulemaking required by a bill, Senate Bill 553, which is in the Labor Code 6401.9. And it's similar to the existing workplace violence prevention regulation we have in healthcare, which is Title 8, Section 3342. And so we posted discussion drafts back in July of 2024, which is pretty similar to what's in the Labor Code. And then we held an advisory committee in January 2025. We updated our draft. And then we held another advisory committee November of 25. And then we'll post an additional draft and hopefully start rulemaking on that pretty soon. And next we have process safety management in refineries. So currently this regulation has a lot of safety procedures required for petroleum refineries. This would expand it from petroleum refineries to also include renewable refineries. Some refineries have converted from petroleum to using renewable sources of fuel, such as plant products and oils. So it would remove the word petroleum from the Title 8 regulation. And we have the draft text posted there and hope to start rulemaking on that in the near future. Next, we have opioid reversal medications. This is another bill, AB 1976, from a couple of years ago, and a petition to the Standards Board also to require this. But it would require employers to have opioid reversal medications at the workplace and then provide employee training on when and how to use them. And this came about because we've had a huge spike in deaths at workplaces from overdoses, accidental, unintentional overdoses. So you can see from 2015, 2018, it was relatively low, around 20 or less than 20. And it spiked starting then and went up to 117 in 2022, and it dropped 2023. It's dropped a little bit more. And 2024 to around mid 70s. So it's just followed the societal problem of just unintentional overdose from opioids, mainly fentanyl. So that's another rulemaking that we are working on. Plume and smoke exposure in healthcare. So this is kind of a smoke plume that results when doing certain types of surgical procedures that create, I guess, burning of tissue. And it's another bill requiring us to do this regulation. And we have it posted on our website, and we had an advisor meeting January 20th. And so we'll re-update that proposed language and post that again, and then hope to start rulemaking. Workplace violence in healthcare is another bill requiring us to do rulemaking. So it requires weapon detectors at the main entrance and at the entrance to emergency rooms at hospitals, and also personnel to operate the weapon detectors, and then training for those personnel. And then next we have firefighter respiratory protection. This is for wildland and urban interface fires. So currently many of these firefighters are just using bandanas or similarly unprotected equipment in the wildlands when there's fires in the forest and such. And so we're working with manufacturers and fire departments and universities on developing new respirator technology just to better fit for the wildland kind of work that the firefighters do, be a powered air purifying respirator so it doesn't put breathing burden on the firefighters. So that's been worked on for a couple of years now, and we have a draft posted on our website and hope to have an updated draft posted soon. And we've had 2 field trials with kind of experimental respirators in 2024, working with CAL FIRE, many fire departments, the firefighter unions, NIOSH, and then other experts. Your picture shows you some of the firefighters testing out the equipment. And next is hazardous drugs in healthcare, another rulemaking required by bill. And it's based on the NIOSH alert preventing occupational exposures to anti-neoplastic and other hazardous drugs in healthcare. So this is another regulation. We have a draft posted on our website and are requesting comments on that. And lastly, we have rulemaking. This was from a petition to the Standards Board that would cover naturally occurring asbestos. We have a regulation for asbestos, but doesn't fit that well for naturally occurring. It's mainly for removing building materials. So this would be a new regulation to address where it's just naturally in the dirt and rock. And then there's many ways to participate in the rulemaking we do with the Standards Board. I mean, it's the Occupational Safety and Health Standards Board is a separate agency, and they are the members vote whether to accept or reject our proposals. But Cal OSHA Research and Standards Branch will develop the regulations, and then we'll work with the Standards Board staff, and eventually comes up to a vote for to the Standards Board. So they make the ultimate decision. But people can get involved. They have monthly meetings. The third Thursday of every month, the Standards Board meets. They're usually at a different city every month. But you can also attend in Zoom. I have that link up there if you want to see their meeting schedule. And if you want to speak at the meetings, it's open to public comments during the meeting. And next bullet, you could also send comments to the Standards Board via email, and they'll read it out loud at the meeting. And thirdly, you can also ask to present Standards Board. If you have a presentation, you can make a request to present at the Standards Board. And then lastly, with Standards Board, you can petition for a change or for a new occupational safety and health regulation. So they have the petition process. We've had many petitions recently. And so that's for the Standards Board. As far as Cal OSHA, you can attend the subject matter advisory meeting, the website listed below, and that is on the specific subject matters such as like surgical plume or workplace violence. For each regulation we're developing, we hold advisory meetings, and those are open to the public to provide their input, or also send in written comments if that's preferred, or do both. And then thirdly is the general Cal OSHA Advisory Committee meeting. This is just kind of all of Cal OSHA. It's not for any specific regulation, just any issues regarding Cal OSHA. They have these meetings about 3 times a year, and so they list them there. And those are also by Zoom or by in person. So, okay, that's all I got. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was really helpful just to go over the summary of everything that has changed and is planning on being changed in the regulations. So first, we'll take a look at the questions that are in the chat or in the Q&A feature, and then we'll bring up some questions that were also in the registrations. So I see a question on here that says, how does one unintentionally overdose on opioids? Seems like the action would be more intended than not. That's referring.
Well, yeah, people with addiction problems take opioid intentionally, but they're not intentionally overdosing. They're not intending to kill themselves most of the time, or nearly all the time. They're not. They're just getting the drug that they need. But the overdose is unintentional. The use is intentional.
We have another question on here that says, do you see a possibility for California rule regarding addressing psychosocial hazards to protect worker mental health, given the evidence of harm caused by worker-related psychosocial hazards? This would be a cross-occupation, cross-sector rule.
We're not working on anything like that currently. We have seen research on that, and if that's something you're interested in, that would be great to bring up at a Standards Board meeting, or a petition to the Standards Board, or at a Cal OSHA meeting. But yeah, there's many ways to get that addressed.
Eric, I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about, have you seen anything come up as far as with the workplace violence standard? Any psychosocial hazards, or I don't know if anything has already come up with that standard. I know it hasn't been too long.
We did have a petition in the past regarding this workplace bullying. So just like, I guess, harassment, but that was denied by the Standards Board. So that was more of a, I guess, mental health issues in the workplace. So we had that, but that was denied. And then the current workplace prevention regulation, workplace violence prevention regulation, does consider a threat of violence, equally to an actual act of violence. So it does also include that. And then after there's an incident, the employers, at least in the healthcare one, the employer is required to provide, at least make available counseling to any employee that may be affected.
Great. And I wonder, and I know you touched on it a little bit, but I wonder if you can talk a little bit more in depth about what it looks like. Let's say if Marnie did want to bring this forth to talk through the steps that one can take to, is it first step, bring forth a petition, do a presentation? What does that look like?
Yeah, petition, there's instructions on the website about how to do a petition, but it's pretty open. You can do whatever you prefer. You can actually do it orally or in writing. Most of the time it's in writing. Just an explanation of the problem, why a regulation is needed, and your specific ideas, what the regulation would look like. And then Cal OSHA will evaluate it and provide an opinion on if that should go forward, and the Standards Board staff will do the same thing. And then the Standards Board members will vote if we should go forward with that. And I'd be happy to meet with, an individual that's interested in writing a petition. If they need some tips, I can show them some previous petitions. They are also posted, so you can look at previous ones and what happened to them, so you can see if they're successful or not. So there's been about 610 petitions so far in the Standards Board history. So, and not all of them posted, but a lot of them are posted, so you can look at those. But I'd be also happy to talk with people.
Great, thank you. We have someone asking, I guess going back to the question about workplace violence, why was harassment not included in that?
Oh, trying to remember. Yeah, the Standards Board considered that. I think because there's another agency that covers that, Civil Rights Department, I believe it's called. It used to be called something else, but recently it became the Civil Rights Department. So there's some concern about jurisdiction, and so that they voted that down.
And I see on here it says sharing that information would be great to move forward with psychosocial hazard rules. Yeah, so we'll definitely be sharing out this presentation that includes the links, and one of them does include the petition for a change to occupational safety and health rules. So the instructions are on there. But yes, Eric, if you have anything else that could support folks who are interested in learning more about that, I think that would be much appreciated. So I don't see any other questions in the chat here. So I'm going to go to some of the questions that we had from the registrations. So the first one was, what can worker advocates do to help support, improve Cal OSHA enforcement?
Well, I'd say come to the meetings, either the Standards Board meetings as well as the Cal OSHA meetings, and just make yourself visible, or others make it visible, the issues, and bring it to the attention of the Standards Board and Cal OSHA, just making it on the forefront. I recall there was a petition to require like an ergonomics regulation for hotel housekeeping workers. And when they first put that forward, the Standards Board denied it, and pretty emphatically. And then the hotel workers union kept, came to every meeting and spoke up about it and the need for it, and the hazards the workers faced that were pretty serious, and the pressures they were under. And they showed up at every meeting for many months, and then eventually they swayed the Standards Board just because their continuous presence and bringing workers. They brought workers to every meeting. And so that was effective in bringing about a change in policy, where at first they rejected it, and they came around, and now there is a regulation protecting hotel housekeeping workers from ergonomic hazards.
Great, thank you. We also have a question regarding if there are any changes to the online reporting for the OSHA 300A form.
Yes,
Those requirements.
I don't know anything about that. Sorry.
Okay.
We have a consultation branch. They're on our website, and feel free to call them and they'll help you.
Okay, maybe we can address that too in our follow-up email. Another question in the chat. Do you foresee any changes or benefits for employers participating in voluntary prevention program?
Oh yeah, that's part of Cal OSHA consultation. I think it exempts them from plan inspections, so the employers would be not be affected by plan inspections if they participate in that program, to the best of my recollection. But I recommend contacting that specific program, the VPP program, Voluntary Protection Program, directly to ask them about the benefits. It's also on our website. Yeah, I don't work with them, so I don't know it too well.
Can you talk a little bit, Eric, about the services that the consultation branch provides? Like what can employers reach out for? I know there was a comment in the chat that said safety concerns are understood. However, all the added rules and regulations every year place a higher burden on many levels on the employers. So maybe like what are those resources out there for employers to make sure that they are staying on top and um, being sure to follow the changes in the regulations, but at the same time receiving that help.
Yeah, with Cal consultation, it's completely separate from enforcement. Their job is just to help employers come into compliance with all the regulations. So they can help employers like with on-site visits, just and help them with their plans or help them address hazards in the workplace. They also can do, on the over the phone or through email, provide assistance to employers. Yeah, so their only job is really to help employers come into compliance, and they're not allowed to talk to enforcement, so the employers can be comfortable discussing issues with them. And there's a lot of information on them on our website, so I recommend going there and talking to them directly.
Great. Thank you for that. We also do have a question regarding what data do you think is the most effective to promote rulemaking in your experience? Do you think bringing forth research, worker testimonies, a mixture? What do you think is most effective when trying to, put together a petition or advocate for these changes?
Yeah, for the initial petition, I think the workplace injury and illness data is critical, and the scientific literature, peer-reviewed scientific literature, demonstrating the problem and the issue and why regulation is needed. And after that is presented, then also getting workers to at the meetings themselves to talk about the problems, and so that people can see what it's like from their perspective. So both are important. I think initially with all the scientific data showing the issue, and then the worker voices backing that up.
Great. Um, and another question on here, how long does it typically take between the time, like I know it's probably different, but on average, would you say between when, there's a petition to how long do, I guess, on average, the steps take to when we can actually see some kind of rulemaking?
Yeah, it's a highly variable. Like lead
Mhm.
took 13 years, I believe, 13, 14 years. Others can take as little as 1 year. Like silica was less than 1 year, and lead was 13 years, but I'd say most maybe 3 to 5 years.
Okay,
But
great.
yeah, highly variable depending. Lead was just very difficult, and depended on a lot of science.
Yeah. I see another question in the chat. It says, I see a lot of bills that lead to rulemaking. Would this be a pathway if the standards board denied the petition regarding psychosocial hazards and psychological health and safety?
Yeah, that's been a strategy used before when if a petition goes through, and then go to legislature, and the legislature can basically tell the standards board to do something.
Okay. Let me see if we have any other questions on here, or else we'll take more from the registration.
Oh, I forgot to mention, for workplace violence in general industry, the legislature basically wrote the regulation. They put the entirety of the requirements in the bill or in the labor code, and then said Cal OSHA shall enforce. So in that capacity, they bypassed the standards board and just put the regulation in the labor code and said Cal OSHA shall enforce. So that's another alternative.
Great. I wonder, Eric, if you can talk a little bit about SB 1350 and the changes made to domestic workers and their protections under Cal OSHA.
Yeah, a little bit. So yeah, domestic workers were traditionally exempted from Cal OSHA protections going back many years. I think to the 70s, they exempted domestic workers and households from being protected by Cal OSHA regulations. And that changed last July. And now they do have protections. I believe it's limited to those that work for like a company that does um, kind of provides workers to homeowners for domestic work. So I think that's the limitation. But it's a major change that provides protections for most of these workers.
Great. And I do see a comment in the chat that says no foreseeable changes for the Cal BPP program. And Calvin Wong is offering his contact information there if anyone has questions about that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we'll give it here a second to see if there's more questions in the chat. If not, I'll continue with the pre-registered questions. One more question here. It says, so technically there isn't a Cal OSHA regulation for workplace violence, rather enforcing the labor code.
There's a regulation for prevention of workplace violence in healthcare. That's in Title 8. Then outside of healthcare, there's one for general industry that's in the labor code. And yeah, Cal OSHA is now writing citations based on that labor code, but it's very detailed and it's based off the healthcare regulation. And we're working right now to put all those labor code requirements in Title 8 and plus adding some additional details. So that's correct, but it basically acts like a Title 8 regulation, just it sits in the labor code now. Because most of the labor code sections we don't enforce. It's based on an appeals board decision going back many years that we don't cite the labor code. But in these specific instances like workplace violence, they actually wrote in the code that Cal OSHA shall enforce this section. So in those cases, we do enforce it, but that's not usual. There's only a few places where they say that.
Great. We did have a question regarding the IPP standard. So this is, I think, a question that I've also seen come up a lot, whether the language requirement actually. So on the standard, it says it needs to be accessible to workers, but it doesn't specify that it needs to be in writing in different languages, but best practices, we say that that is something that should be done if the employees speak another language that should be on there. But I think we've just heard maybe different things. So if you can talk a little bit about what is actually the requirement there as far as the IPP and the accessibility.
Well, first off, the program has to be effective, so it actually has to actually work, in protecting employees. So for it to be effective, it needs to be in another language, and that would be a requirement. It's going to depend on the workplace and how the program is implemented. But it doesn't have any specific requirement on languages, but it's based on the effectivity. So the program has to be effective. And that may require it to be in other languages for it to be effective.
Okay.
And the training would definitely have to be in the language that people understand for it to be effective.
Yes, the training we definitely hear and say, yeah, that has to be in whatever languages workers feel most comfortable in. But I think that there's just been a lot of questions that we get regarding whether the actual document needs to be in multiple languages, but we take it as if it says in order for people to for it to be accessible, that means that yes, it needs to be in the language that they feel comfortable reading also. Especially now with the change, right? That they must have access to the IPP within, I believe it's 5 business days, right? The change.
Oh yeah, where they get a copy of the program, they can get a copy of the program.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that change? Because that I think might be something that some people might want to know a little bit more about too.
Yeah, this came out in the last couple of years, 2, 3 years. I can't remember, but it's relatively recent compared to the IIPP itself, which came out 30 some years ago. But does require that the employers make the IIPP, the actual written program, available to employees, and also they have the right to have a copy of the program. And that's basically it. So if the employee wants to look at the program, they have the right to look at it. They want a copy of it, they have a right to a copy. And yeah, they have 5 business days to provide a copy after an employee or their representative, someone they say represents them, has a copy of it.
Great. And there was another question about what are the requirements now? And I think I've seen some fact sheets out by DIR on this, as far as what employers need to let their workers know, as far as if there's any immigration enforcement or anything like that that is going to take place on the work site. I believe that there was some communication out about that.
Yeah, I think that was from the labor commissioner. I don't recall exactly, but I'd have to look it up. But I thought there was some duty to, let employees know if something like that could happen. But
Yeah.
I don't recall the details of it.
Yeah, for the person that asked this, we can also share that fact sheet so they can have more information specifically about what's required. We can include that in the follow-up email. But yeah, there's um, they must let workers know if anything's going to happen in the workplace ahead of time, and there's a lot of good information on there, so we'll make sure to share that around. I do see another question in the chat. It says, I believe there was a revision to the federal HAZCOM standard. Can you speak to the status of any planned update to the California standard?
Yeah, we're reviewing the changes. I think some of the changes made it less protective than what we have now, and some are make it better. So we have to go in careful analysis and just incorporate those changes that improve worker safety and don't incorporate ones that reduce worker safety. So we're in the process of reviewing that.
Great. And Eric, is there a place where, because there are so many changes and, there's planned updates and, a lot taking place as we've seen in your presentation, is there like a one-stop shop, a place that folks can go and see what are the changes? Is there, on the site, is there a one place to go to just look at all the changes?
We do have a web page on all the advisory committees we're holding for the different subject matters, be it exposure to plume in healthcare or workplace violence or heat illness prevention. There's like, I don't know, some 20 some advisory committees listed there. So that I can put that in the chat. I think it was on my slides as well, but I'll put in the chat.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll make sure to share that in the email too. So all of
And
this information and anything in the chat we'll share out.
okay, and then if you go to the Standards Board website, it has a list of approved regulations, so you can see the ones that are most, and it has it by year, so you can see the ones that are the most recent ones. But so they have a list basically. And if you go to their website, it has a link for rulemaking that's still in process, and then the separate link for rules that were approved. So if you clicked on that approved link, it'll show you all the ones in the recent years that were approved, and it lists the year, so you can quickly identify the new ones. And I'll put those both in the chat in a second.
Okay, thank you so much. So as you do that, I'll just give it one quick minute here to see if any other questions are posted. If not, I'll go ahead and read off the last one we have here. Okay.
I posted the standards board one.
Okay.
I'll
I'll
post the
share it out to everybody on
okay.
here.
Also post the Cal OSHA Advisory Committee one. So the last one I posted was the Cal OSHA Advisory meetings.
Okay. Let me share that out with everybody. There we go. Okay, so those are the two links that were shared, and we'll include everything again in the email along with the slides and a link to the recorded presentation. So Eric, one of the questions that we always like to ask of our presenters is how did you get started in occupational health? I think it's always really interesting to hear from our presenters kind of how they found their way into this field.
Okay, yeah, that's a good story I have. I was working in environmental health. I was in Mexico testing the water for pesticide contamination, and you're seeing parts per billion. And I was out there testing the water. I see the workers, they have these pesticide backpack sprayers on their back. And they're leaking all over them, and they're in a cloud of pesticides where they're applying the pesticides with these sprayers for the backpack. And so they just had enormous exposures. And I thought, well, looking at the wrong thing here. The workers have so much higher exposures, so much more working are just terrible conditions compared to the general population that's where I thought the emphasis was needed to dedicate my career. So that's how I kind of switched from environmental to occupational.
Interesting. Yeah, it's always really nice to hear like what was that moment for people. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Eric. We
Sure.
really appreciate your time. I know Evie's also online, still here with us, so thank you so much, Evie, for sharing about how to apply for Cal OSHA positions. So we'll be sharing both of your contact information with everybody. Um, and we do have another guest speaker series coming up on March 19th. So be on the lookout for that. We'll send out more information in our follow-up email about that too. But yeah, with that, I'm going to go ahead and just share the evaluation link. So for those of you that haven't attended one of our sessions before, in order to receive continuing education hours, you need to submit the evaluation, and on there it'll ask you if you want to receive a certificate for the continuing education hours, and you'll just put your name on there how you want it to appear on your certificate. Please allow up to a week and a half to receive your certificate. They are sent out manually. We really appreciate everybody coming today. And if you do have further questions, feel free to reach out. We will be putting together some extra resources for you all. But yeah, I don't know, Eric, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up here?
No, thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate it, and do everything you can to keep workers safe and healthy.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. We're ending here a little bit early, but hope you have a great rest of your day and good Friday, good weekend too. Take care.
Right. Thank you very much.